Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Come on in the space. Let me know that you are here. We are here tonight on Tisa's Rants and Musings, and we got an awesome show ahead. Just some questions we need to wrestle with about what are we supposed to do with this holiday that we've been probably celebrating for years, but like now it doesn't even feel the same. So I don't know. Come on in the space. I need y'all to help me wrestle with this so I can figure out what I'm doing on July 4th. Am I still going to find a barbecue or not? What am I doing? Okay. Hey, Jamie. Thanks for being on. All right, you guys, let me know you're here. Okay, it's good to be back on and with you tonight. We have a special guest. So I'm gonna give a few more minutes for a few more people to get in on the space, and then we're gonna just have dialogue about how do we handle this. It's getting heated in some spaces. So we want to talk about it. Come on in, drop a note, let me know you're here so that I can shout you out. Let me know that you are here. Hey, Mom. All right. All right. Waiting for a few more people to get in on the room. You guys know I don't mind starting with whomever will, right? Because you could always tag somebody. You could always post it on your page just so somebody can enjoy something different. It's a different dialogue than what might be or you're seeing on Facebook. So it's always good to have something other than some of what we see all the time. So tag a friend, invite someone to have this dialogue with us because I want to know, what are y'all doing? What are y'all going to do? Are you guys still going to have your 4th of July celebrations? Are we still doing red, white, and blue? Like, are we still, like, what we doing? I don't know. I don't know. I'm concerned for the people. I don't know. So I want us to talk about it. All right, I got 903, and you guys know how I feel about it. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. And those who come into space, be in the space, and those may have to catch it later. But I want to give our guests as much time as possible to help us wrestle with some of these questions. All right. All right. Let's do it. Hey everybody, welcome to Tisa's Rants and Musings. We are ranting and musing. Why? Because brokenness is too expensive and healing is the only agenda. We are here tonight. I missed you guys last week, but I'm excited to be back tonight because we got stuff to talk about. We got stuff to mess with. We got stuff. I need your opinion. I need to know what y'all doing. What we doing as the community. I need to understand so we can have some unity amongst the peoples. Okay, so I am honored, though, to have tonight to help us wrestle with some of these questions about just what do we do with these holidays now. We talked about the last show we had. We talked about Juneteenth. We talked about it not being enough and whether or not we need to celebrate it. But here we are at July 4th, and many of us, this has been the only holiday that we've had it in a long time. I think since Easter perhaps. So a lot of us have spent July 4th really celebrating, really coming together as family, having barbecues, picnics, doing family things. But that was before so much has been happening, right? That was before so much of this fight to oppress our voices and our lives had seemingly has just been underway. So what do we do now? Do we keep going on as we usually do? So, like I said, I'm honored to have my special guest, Dr. Kirk Johnson. He's a friend to the show. He's been on the show before, if you remember, discussing his book, Medical Stigmata. He has another book out that he will tell us about that you would want to have in your library because it just talks about all of the Black-owned businesses that we can actually frequent. But he's here to help us wrestle with these questions. So please help me welcome to the floor of Tisa's Rants and Musings in the room, to the studio, Dr. Kirk Johnson. Yay!
Hey, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening. We're so glad that you could join us on tonight. Listen, you have a wealth of information just about Juneteenth. You have a wealth of information just about navigating these spaces where race and ideology, right, and then theology comes into play. So I'll give you just a quick example. I was in a room. Hey, LA Justice. Hey, Peggy. Hey, Jamie. I knew you what you meant. So listen, I was in a room and somebody put out, it was like a decorating room, group, and they put out that they were putting up their July 4th red, white, and blue stuff. And when I tell you the comments lit up, people were like, why are you celebrating that? Like, it got really hectic. People were going back and forth at each other. We don't need to celebrate it. Some people saying we've always celebrated. I celebrate both. And so it just made me think of just that sense that once again, we're not united. Like, we don't have this uniformity in the community, right? To say, okay, this is where we're putting our efforts. This is where we're not. This is what it's kind of all over the place. So what do we do with July 4th now? Understanding what it is now that we do have Juneteenth, but also understanding what we're still struggling up against. Are we making too much out of this? Have we just now gone too far, in making everything mean something? What do you think?
Right. Well, first, thank you for having me back on the show. It's great to see you. And what's up, everybody out there watching and listening? Well, the first thing is blackness and black people, we're not monolithic, right? We always have our own, what you're talking about, Black Caribbean, that's a whole diversity and culture in itself. You're talking about black folks in South America. You're talking about black folks here in America. You're talking about black
Right.
folks in the continent of Africa, or the black folks are in Europe, right? So because we have a diversity within ourselves, we're not monolithic in ourselves. There's going to be different perspectives and opinions based on the history where you're coming from. So for me, I'm from, of course, a Caribbean, but also African American background. My father's from North Carolina. My mother's from Jamaica. So even the vicissitudes of blackness, if I could term that correctly, right, is
Right.
different in regards to understanding history and the different modes of oppression that we have endured, depending on geography, culture, history. So for me, when folks actually ask me the question about should you celebrate July 4th, I say do what you feel that's best, right, for yourself. For 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 me, I like to celebrate July 4th because I get to spend time with family. Um, and I think as Black folks, we can look at it in the lens of saying, you know what, I'm celebrating July 4th, celebrating us as Black people, even though our country still doesn't treat us the way it ought to regarding politics, education, finances. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on, right? And it's particularly interesting because there's a dilemma now with Juneteenth. And I do have to critique this because, yes, I'm excited that it's a federal holiday, but that literally the quickest passing of anything I've seen regarding Black folks in forever. Um,
Right. We
since
still
I
have a voter rights bill. Right.
Exactly. What about the George Floyd police attack? What about
Right. Right.
the voting bills that John Lewis and the other particular bills that are out there regarding voting, which right now is being stripped, literally, not just
Right.
Georgia but also all over the country. Right. What about now the attacking of curriculum through critical race theory? Right. It's so interesting that they passed Juneteenth, but then in certain states they're passing laws that you can't even teach about a federal law that you just passed. How does that make any sense,
Makes
right? It
sense.
doesn't make
Right.
any sense. So,
Right. So then
now
let me
we.
ask you though, but then let
Mhm.
me ask you, not to cut you off, but let me ask you because, again, historically, July 4th has been a time that I've been able to run up on people that I love, eat their food, laugh and joke with them. Like, it's a holiday I've always enjoyed. I've enjoyed the fireworks, I've enjoyed it. But I guess I wonder about, because again, like you said, all of these things haven't happened for us as Black people. The
Mhm.
reality is that we aren't experiencing independence the way we should be and the way we have a right to. So I'm always thinking of the dollar, right? It's not just saying we're boycotting for boycott's sake, but the dollars that go into the July 4th holiday, the food that we buy, the decorations that we buy, all that we do to help support that holiday. I just wonder if this is one of those that we may need to rethink, right? Because why are we putting that money into that, like feeding into the capitalism of that holiday, while they still are these things that they're refusing to do for us? And I know. I mean, again, you can say, but this is, but where's our sacrifice? Like, where do we sacrifice, right? For the greater good, to say we need to make a stance here, right? That we are not going to put money or spend money at local Walmart or these stores that don't even back Black people's issues, but we're going to boycott it, especially on a holiday that they think we would be celebrating. I don't know. I'm just struggling with it so much.
No, absolutely. You got to put your money where your not just your mouth is, as the old saying goes, but put your money where your morals and ethics are, if you will. So for me, I think it's not just on July 4th, but I think we just need to do a better job of investing and really shopping at Black-owned businesses. In general, of course, July 4th is definitely something to be more aware of and cognizant of, but just in general, making it a habit. And the issue for me, at least, is like I didn't have the necessary tools to actually know where to go. Back in the day, we had the Green Book, right, where
Right.
by Victor Green, who was actually an insurance agent who created the Green Book. This little backdrop history, he created
Right.
the Green Book, obviously, to number one, that we could travel to point A to point B safely without being harassed, lynched, God knows what the craziness that our people still go through, but definitely in those particular times within our American history, right? So I guess it'll be a shameless plug. That's why I created my book.
No, I wanted you to talk about it.
Right. It's the entire, and I was like, do I have a copy? And I actually just sold my last hard copy to
Oh,
somebody, so I
and
don't
I'm
have
not
it to like.
home.
So, but I think TC, you have it somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not
'Cause
home though. I'm still in.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, but it's called the Anti-Racism Resource Guide. If you could Google it, and it'll come up. And basically, it is like the modern day yellow or green. Well, it's like the black pages. Basically, you remember back in the day, you had the yellow pages, and so basically, the actual uh, resource guide is a list of black-owned banks, black-owned everything, supermarkets. There's even a black-owned toilet paper company called Freedom Paper Company based out of Maryland, right? There's black-owned resources regarding food. If you like couture for your homes, there's tons of black-owned individuals that are legit that actually uh, create pillows and couches and I mean everything
Yeah.
with within that particular book. So and the reason why I created it is number one for myself because I really didn't have the knowledge. And I know like big tech giants like Google, they have like a black business option on there, which is okay, but really wasn't like something consolidated to actually say, okay, I could literally intentionally give my dollar to a particular black owned business. So that was the point of me creating this book project last year. And again, it's called the Anti-Racism Resource Guide, Volume 1, supporting black businesses and black economics. But the reason why I said that is because we need to, of course, invest in our own. One really striking statistic I was watching on CNBC is that black owned businesses, 50% basically close within a year and up to 75% close within 2 years. So why is that? Well, because of capital. It's been historically and even currently known that it's hard for black businesses to get capital from banks. Banks are unfortunately, highly discriminatory towards not just black community, but also the Latinx community as well. Our brown brothers and sisters as well. So that's why it's really good to know where are our black owned banks, right?
Right.
So I know that more recently we have city Citibank, that was rooted in Newark, New Jersey, but they got bought out by a bigger bank, and the
Right.
name is actually um, the name of the bank is actually escaping me now, but it will come back, and I would tell that you could actually go and open a checking account, or if you're a
Right.
business and you're looking for capital, right? So there's many different financial ways that we could actually support each other on July 4th, but even beyond July 4th. And again, it's about, even though our country doesn't really celebrate us at all, it's about celebrating each other and being with family and friends. So that's how I always interpreted in the dilemma of the hurt and the pain that constantly we see politically, through laws, through policing, through our education systems, through mass incarceration, through
And through
even our
healthcare. Yeah.
healthcare, church, even our churches. I mean, there's so many different ways in which we could start healing ourselves. And by that, in a capitalistic society such as America, we heal ourselves by supporting ourselves, putting our dollar back within our communities, and let that dollar continue to circulate within our communities. So that is my particular mindset. Of course, if you ask another scholar, another clergy or
Right.
professor,
Yes.
they'll have a different perspective, because, of course, we have our own unique variations and understandings and opinions, really convictions about July 4th. But I know one thing that we all couldn't have in common and agree, that we need to reinvest and continue to support our own communities. And July 4th is a great way. It's like, oh, I want to spend money. Let me go to a black owned business and actually support that particular business, celebrating ourselves on July 4th.
That's a thought that instead of just not feeling like you can't do anything, try your best to at least support the black dollar, the black business, invest in that effort so that it's just not another capitalistic, you know,
Right.
event. So I think that's a really good idea. You said something that I want to tap into, that dichotomy of being Caribbean, also African American. And I don't know if you've heard about, even when we started thinking about reparations and all the things that's on the table that Black people have been asking about forever, that there's now this divide where there's a group that's just talking about separating out African Americans born in America versus um, Africans from Americans from the African diaspora, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, to your point about us not being a monolith, do we need to be teasing out this kind of the our diversity in this way? Like, if we continue to tease out, how do we come together to really fight a system that doesn't mind coming together to fight against us?
Right, right. I think we need to. That is a very misleading narrative, because it's not like the slave capturers and of course those individuals who are involved with this global enterprise, keyword global enterprise, called the transatlantic slave trade, picked out. Oh no, we're just going to take black folks from this place. No, the color of your skin was the
Right.
precursor of you being, of course, enchained and put into chattel slavery for centuries, right? So we have to be mindful of that. That the transatlantic slave trade was a global enterprise, and unfortunately, it still exists today, not in the chattel slavery we know now. Of course, we know in our American context, mass incarceration, but now the sex trade is huge. Unfortunately, that prowls on women and young girls, and also men. But of course, a higher percentage of women and girls as well. So even today, there's still slavery. There's different forms. I mean, not in the traditional chattel slavery that we understand in America, right? Like for example, Brazil has more slaves ever than North America ever had in regards to chattel slavery. A history that we really don't talk about and really look into. But Europe, North America, South America, even Asia, Asian countries also participated in the transatlantic slave trade. And of course, this
And
is a
you never
history,
hear about them, and you
right?
never hear about that.
Exactly. And of course, we don't, because, well, we have opposition to teach these things in places that they don't even teach already. But of course, as soon as you mention, that, something that shouldn't be hot button, critical race theory, it
Right.
becomes, oh no, 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 we're teaching our kids to be racist and all, and it has nothing to do with that. It's saying that we embrace the melting pot of America, right? Well, if we are a melting pot, that means there's different histories and stories that we ought to tell, that we should tell, and of course part of the Black experience is the American experience, right?
Right.
But also the Latinx experience is what we should talk about. Native Americans, which I like to call the first Americans, because they were here. It's their land, right? That was stolen
Right.
from them through the process of the Trail of Tears and many other injustices to that group. AAPI, Asians and Pacific Islanders, right? These are histories, right, that we also need to include in our curriculum for us to obviously be more well-rounded and holistic in what our country has done, but also what we should not repeat, right? And I think a huge catalyst of white supremacy, a huge catalyst of continuing racism and the structural racism that we have is ignorance. Because if you continue to ignore a problem, then you don't need to fix the problem, right? But if you continue to be educated about a problem or an issue, then you really have no choice but to fix it because you're aware of it. So ignorance is such a huge maintenance, if you will. It's the glue
Right.
that holds white supremacy and all these other different ideologies and ideas of systematic racism together. One last particular point I want to mention is that again, the global significance. So we always big on 1619, right? That
Right.
amazing by Dr. Hannah Jones, which of course finally she received tenure from UNC, which never should have been a problem. But again, the
Right.
systems of trying to censor and trying to filter, a transparent racial history or racial histories, plural, from the textbooks in our school systems in our curriculum. But really, it started way back before 1619. It's actually started 1433 by the Portuguese, right? So we really should not be talking about 1619. We should actually be going back to the 15th century in 1433, where Portuguese really started to actually go on the west coast of Africa and actually look into slave trade. And the actual first two African slaves was actually in 1441 by Portuguese sea captain Anton Goncalves. Actually, that's the
Wow.
guy's name. So it predates way before the 17th century. It starts actually in the 15th century. And again, because this is a global enterprise, to answer your question again, you can't pick and choose, because if you had more melanin in your skin, you were a target based on this global enterprise called chattel slavery through the transatlantic slave trade, right? So these are different mechanisms that we really need to be aware of in these conversations that we're having regarding Juneteenth, regarding history of slavery, regarding, of course, supporting the black dollar, right? Because a lot of the actual systemic issues that we have now is to continue to make black individuals economically oppressed, right? That is the target, is to make black folks economically oppressed and, of course, disenfranchised in many different ways. So yeah, I know that was a long answer, but there, of course,
But
because
it
you
was
asked that
thorough.
question,
It
it
was
was
long and
different.
thorough. Thank
Yeah.
you. It
Mhm.
was long and thorough, and to me, it gave even more to think about when we start sometimes hearing, some of these groups come out and not understanding. Um, I'm sorry. Hold. Um, Hearing some of these groups come about, and the division that some of the issues that we need to be united together towards, we're breaking down and not understanding how much of that plays into the breaking down of us really being able to get what we really want, right?
Right.
Which if the fight is about reparations, right? If the fight is about equal rights, voting rights, all of that, breaking and teasing out whether or not Caribbean born people that immigrated to America should be able to get reparations or not. To me, all of that still feeds into us not being able to be united, and for them
Right.
to use that as an excuse against us. See, they can't even come together to figure out who should get reparations, and so we're just not going to do anything and try anything like that. So
Right. And I think it's
what is your
internalized, and I
feedback
think it's
on that?
internalized oppression, because I've seen it like we say, oh, well, this culture isn't black enough. Like, what is that? That's just another form of colorism, right? Cultural colorism, if I could term it like that, right? We always come up with these excuses amongst ourselves about who this culture isn't black enough, right? Or this
Right,
person doesn't really understand the black experience. So what is the black experience? Black, again, the black experience is just one thing. It's a multitude of, that's what makes us so great as a people, because we have that diversity of opinion, a diversity of cultures and histories. Yes, we have a lot of similarities, obviously, but there are differences that make us unique in our own self, which doesn't take away our blackness, if you will. So it is kind of like a form of colorism. And of course, for those that know what colorism is, it's of course
right,
the the more light skinned folks are more favored compared to the more darker skinned folks, and it dates back all the way to the plantations, where of course the lighter skinned folks worked in the house and the darker skinned folks worked outside and in the fields, and all that, right? Which of course is another form of internalized oppression. Now, we hated
right.
people because they were more lighter skinned, and these are still conversations that go today. What's good hair, right? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So yeah, exactly. Peggy, what's up, Peggy? um so yeah, it's like this tribalism, right? Oh, we
Yeah,
call it ethnocentrism. That's the
yeah,
actual
yeah,
term
yeah,
of you being so entrenched with your own particular culture, that everything you say and do is the correct way. You kind of like negate and exclude everybody else's particular opinion, right? And we have that actually within the black church as well, right? Regarding different communities of blackness, if you will, whether it's Caribbean, European, from the continent, from the motherland of Africa, South America, so these are different conversations we have to actually continue to have, and real heart to heart conversations, and be real about this type of colorism, not necessarily skin color, but this cultural type of element of colorism and bias within black communities. So I
yeah.
think those are important elements as well to really emphasize and look into.
Yeah, yeah. And Peggy, thank you for your comment. She said that she's had conversation with some of her African student workers, and she said in her comment that some of them see African Americans as sellouts. If I'm reading it right, African Americans in some African cultures are viewed as sellouts, thus creating the conundrum of unifying for the common cause. And I've heard similar things like this, right? Where it's about, you know, um, Africans having a viewpoint of who and what African Americans are, especially when they get here, and then African Americans having feelings about Africans and the distance between us and the Caribbeans with African Americans. Like we've already always had these divisions come up,
Mhm.
but I'm inclined now to want to throw it out there and bring a light to how this undermines us, right? How these divisions undermine us, and to your point, is a sign of that internalized oppression that comes out of racism, that we're still pitted against each other, right?
Mhm.
And if they keep pitting us against each other again, who wins? That, white supremacy wins. So
Right.
how do we start educating ourselves about other cultures, right, and about each other, and start really fighting against the stereotypes that we've been brainwashed through white supremacist kind of viewpoints to see of each other, right?
Right.
Like, how do we break down these things, and even just, in our music, in our videos, in all that we're doing? I feel like it needs to be all hands on deck right now, right? We don't need any movies now that show us in anything other than favorable lights. This is my opinion, right? Like, I don't need
Right.
to see any more gangsters. I don't need to see any more movies of police beating up folk, police. But I don't want to see police brutality. I don't care about if it's Will Smith or not. Okay,
Right.
I need another bad boy right now. Unless they fighting against somebody other than people of color. Like, I don't want to. I want all hands to be. This is a unified fight against who we really are, and these stereotypes that we buy into don't help.
Right. Right. We need, first of all, we need just to communicate with each other. We need uh, reconciliation between our African brothers and sisters, because we need each other. We need them to teach us what we've lost when we were over here. But also they need us as well because, of course, they're navigating in this particular context called America. So we need each other. We need these dialogues and conversations. And I think the stereotypes, as you said, are deeply rooted within media, um,
Right.
especially if you have our brothers and sisters that have never come to America. The only lens that they see us is through what they see on TV and what they hear on the radio. And if
Right.
that lens is skewed, right, if it's something that is very narrow minded and stereotypical, you can't blame them and say, oh, this is how African Americans are, right? And usually you see these two paradigms. There's no balance. You usually see the very successful black folks, the Oprahs, the Magic Johnsons, the athletes, the entertainers, right? Or you see the very complete opposite of the poor individuals, people that are on
Right.
welfare and all these other different things. You don't see people like us, right? We're in
Right.
the middle trying to figure it
Right.
out ourselves.
Right.
It's
Oh, on the
very
other side, you only see the children who are dying of hunger in
right in the shacks, but you
Africa
don't see the
with
actual
the
infrastructure,
flies,
right?
right? They show us the same picture of the same, children. Not to say that that's not serious and may not actually be
Right.
happening, but
Oh,
that
it's
does
part
not
of it. It's
make
part
up
of it,
the
but it's not the
whole
whole
of
thing.
Africa, right? So
Exactly.
we all get these skewed viewpoints of one another, but there's so much education at our fingertips right now. Most of us have smartphones. Most of us have means to look beyond what we used to have years ago
Right.
to fight against those and so I just wonder, do we really take those opportunities, or do we complacently or apathetically buy into them because we haven't done any of our own homework?
Exactly. And I think it's also that tribalism amongst African Americans. Like I remember comedians, always having the jokes of Africans about them eating rats and, the and all these other different tropes of Africans. And it's like, well, you're kind of not kind of, you're really dismantling that conversation because you're reinforcing the stereotypes that we see over and over. And also
Right.
I think theologically as well, we have to uh, how can I use this? I think we need to reconstruct our theology of African religions in the
Mhm.
way that, because I remember, not particularly in my context, but I know of other contexts is that they say, oh, that's voodoo or that's the devil and all that. And I was like, well, where you think we got all this stuff from? It is rooted within our African lineage, is rooted within our African history, right?
Right.
A lot of the ways we shout, you go back in the tribes, they shout the same way we do. Why? Because that's what connects
Right.
us,
It's in
right?
our blood.
Yeah, it's in our blood, right? It's in every fiber of our being. So we have to reconstruct and shape our theology of African religions and saying, you know what, we embrace it. And I know, especially in the past 20 years, we become more knowledgeable about African religions and traditions, and we become more embraceable. But there's still, unfortunately, there's still schisms about that, saying
Yeah.
that's completely evil, and there's still, unfortunately, pictures of white Jesus in black churches, unfortunately, even in 2021. And I'm like,
Never
y'all
lied.
know Jesus wasn't black. Jesus was a Jewish, a brown skinned Palestinian Jewish man. He
Right.
wasn't, he didn't look anything like that. We don't know what Jesus looked like, but I know he didn't look like that, especially geographically
Right. Right.
being close to the sun, right? You're gonna have a little kiss, your skin is gonna be a little kissed by the sun. So these are just um, you know, centuries of theologies that we have to
Right.
continue to unwrap and unwind within our own religious contexts, right? So these are different things that I think that starts with communication and really reconcile and having these difficult conversations, right,
Right.
with each other in order to create a bond and a bridge that we really so desperately need. We need each other, right?
We need each other,
Yeah,
and we need to recognize how much we need each other, and I think that's what I feel has oftentimes been missing. And so where do we start with trying to bring those dialogues together? Like, how do we? And again, I think I've raised this question even before with just even the Asian population, but to me, even the Muslim,
mm-hmm.
as Christians, right? Oftentimes we don't engage the Muslims in our community. It's always one or the other doing something versus a coming together, not on a theological um, like on the same theological platform, but on a community loving the people platform, right? On doing what the community needs and not letting our differences be what keeps dividing us and separating us, because we can't afford it. We can't afford to be as divided as we have been anymore. When they're making laws where if you hand somebody some water while they're on the line, an elderly person on the line to vote, it can be a crime. This is not the time for us to get caught up where I can't work with them because they Muslim. I can't. No, if
Right.
it's our community work right now, we're not doing evangelism.
Right.
Right? The
Right.
kingdom is, and God knows how to deal with his own people, his own children, right? So he don't need us to handle that all the time. There are some other things that we need to be concerned about, and that's looking at the holistic person, not just their spirit life. It's easy to preach Jesus, but if people are still hungry, if they can't get good health care, if they can't, we they still going to prison for weed. Okay,
Right.
while other people are legalizing it and now making billions of dollars off of it. Like, we have to come together, and I just don't know if we figured out how yet.
Right. Well, I think one way we could actually come together, of course, is we do very well is we actually love conferences. We conference out. Why can we have? Reminds me of Dr. Arya Raja. Um,
Yes, who I went
Back,
to India with.
yeah, when because he Dr. Arya Raj, for those who don't know, he's a retired professor from Jew Theological School, and he used to work. I still think he still works in the World Council of Churches. And I know that I'll never forget one point he made back in my seminary days was. In order for you to actually start something, first of all, you need to come together and just talk, have difficult conversations. And I don't know, and of course, if anybody knows, even after recording, if you know, in America, have we actually came to like have like an actual inclusive um, talk with, of course, the Abrahamic religions, our Jewish brothers and sisters, because they started it, right? And then, of course, us Christians, and then, of course, historically after that, our Muslim brothers and sisters, right? Have we actually had something? Not to my knowledge. I probably actually should email him and ask him if there was something in America, North America specifically, that we need to have these conversations. The second thing you mentioned regarding politics, and I think that the church, we have the resources, is that we're not using the resources as we should. Because I think a lot of times, I, I guess I'm just going to say like it is and be blunt. I think we're in bed with a lot of politicians that we shouldn't be in bed with regarding our churches. Um,
Really?
Yes, I honestly think so because we vote these same folks over and over again for 10, 20 years. What really has changed right now? Now, of course, it depends on the particular context you're in. Now, if there's been great change based on the representatives you voted for, wonderful. You did not vote in vain. But if you are continuing to vote for the same person and there's been no change in your communities, there's still issues. You probably need to have a recheck. Like, let's get somebody else that could get the work done. Also, we have to be cognizant of not just the federal and state elections, but our local elections, which I think is even more
Yes.
important. Local elections about who's in charge of the board of education, who's
Yeah.
the mayor, who was in part of the mayor's camp, right? What local laws that they're enforcing, what local laws they have regarding the police, who's the sheriff of the police, right? All these different things. You usually ask people and they have no clue, right? They just
Right.
focus on the bigger picture, which is important. I'm not saying not to focus on the federal, and even the state. Sometimes we really don't have a clue, right? So just being more cognizant of aware, and I think the church could actually, not to say that there aren't black churches that do. That's because they
Right.
tons of that do that. But for those that don't, you should be more aware and more involved within the politics of your community, right? Also, where is the money of our churches going, right? If you're tithing all the time, what does the audit say? What percentage of it goes towards education? What percentage it goes towards, funding a community center, right? Like, where our money is going? How is our money being funneled, right? That's
Right.
another particular important piece that we need to be a part of. Even though this is really ethically challenging here, churches could also be super PACs, right? Churches could actually contribute to various political organizations, and of course
And the
that is
white ones too.
right,
Okay, the
and a
white
lot of them do.
evangelicals do. They
Right,
have funded and supported the George Bushes. They
right,
have, but they back their people, and
right,
it's us who we either are saying we don't believe politics belongs in the church, or, we just let them come, but we don't take a stance. We don't try to help guide people any type of way. Um, to at least get educated on how to
right,
be educated. Again, some of us do, but then some of where we need it to be happening is where it isn't happening. And that's
correct,
in a lot of our urban areas. Is in a lot of those churches that are storefront where there's five of us back to back, right?
right,
How are we reaching those people in those churches to help educate them on why they need to come out and who they need to be thinking about when voting for their best interest? And I don't know if it's getting funneled down into the regular, street on the Brooklyn, sidewalk, right? Who's helping to make sure, you see it in some of the mega churches, you see it in some of the
right.
more affluent, but down into the hood, is that happening? And how do we make that happen if it's not?
Right. And I also think that even though this is not the mentality of a lot of pastors, there is a spirit of competition. And I have to say it because it is true. And I'm not saying that all churches are like that, but there is like, well, I go to this particular church and my pastor goes to this church. And, and again, for the most part, hopefully it's not that, but also again, this is not a competition because there also is politics within churches as well. Obviously there's politics
Right.
everywhere. So these are different things that we can't let be in the way in actual towards progress within our communities, right? And I really think the Black church has a unique opportunity to continue to be a witness, but even more so. I mean, there's no reason why we can't continue to build our own schools. There's no reason why, obviously, based on the convictions of those involved, to contribute to or support our own. If you have somebody in your congregation that wants to run for a local office, to support them, right? We have so much more resources now than our forebears did back in the 50s and 60s, right? And they did so much more. They built HBCUs. They did amazing things with the
Yeah,
nickels
they
and
did.
pennies that they have. And now we actually have salaries and we have all of these other different things. And seems like, and again, not to be pessimistic, because we have come a long way. We've done amazing things, and yes, we still have a way to go. But it seems to me that sometimes that you know how can I say this tastefully? That a lot of times we don't put our money where our mouth is, especially in regarding the organization of the church. Right. I think we could do a lot more. Why can't, like all of our denominations come together and create a health insurance company? We have the money, right? Why can't we do that since we're dealing with a lot of health issues within our communities? How come every church doesn't have the health ministry where we can educate our own, especially now regarding COVID-19, right? And I know there have been a lot of churches, again, I'm not
Right, right.
generalizing,
But
have been
stepping up, doing it, yeah.
right, exactly. Churches being vaccination sites. There are, a handful I know in New Jersey that have done so, which is good. But collectively, just having more cohesion with each other on how we could move. And again, that has a lot to do with communication. That has a lot to do with getting rid of the politics. That has a lot to do with a lot of different um, social
Right,
elements in the way we actually communicate with each other denominationally, but also within our denominations and within with each other. So yeah, I think we could do a lot better. It's just the organizing piece I think is missing in our pursuit to do better.
right. And I think you said what sounds like the key word in all of this is communication. We need
Right,
to be having ecumenical conversations. We need to be having conversations across socioeconomic backgrounds, across faiths, across so many different conversations need to be happening. And the church could be that epicenter, right? That
right.
does act as that place that can facilitate those types of conversations. So I guess the next question I have then is how do we start making it happen? Like what are your thoughts on, again, trying to be solution oriented? So in our little sphere of influence, right? And when I say ours, meaning like the local church? What can the local church do to have that conversation happen? And how can we support each other in trying to make that happen? Because sometimes people want to do things, they don't have the capacity, they don't have, or don't feel like they have the adequate knowledge to do it. They don't know if they have the expertise. Like, and to me, your book is a great example of that, right? Like, here's someone who's done the work for you. You can go and look here and get this. How do how do we do that for, I guess, the local church, right? That wants to have these conversations but don't necessarily know how to start.
Right. Well, first, ask, seek help. And how do you do that? Well, first and foremost, have all the pastors come together. Right. An example would be health ministry. Right. We have individuals in our congregations that are nurses, that are medical doctors, that are social workers, that are professionals in the field. Pick their brain and say, you know what, maybe we could create an alliance in creating, resources. Right. We have people in our churches that do grant writing. This is the biggest thing. Like, there's so like the interesting thing is that I know a lot of times we're strapped for money, right? Because a lot of our contributions come through tithes and offerings, right? But now in 21st century, you got to think outside the box. It's not just about tithes and offerings. Are we investing? Are we getting returns on investment, right? And that could be an IRA, a Roth IRA. It could be investing in a particular stock. I mean, there's so many different ways, right? Um, do we have grant writings in our organization that could actually write grants that we could get approved, that we could actually hire somebody to create an economic development center, right? That could fund a health ministry, that we could partner with hospitals, right, to do checks or to hire people that are healthcare individuals that could actually sign folks up for the Affordable Care Act. And also in New Jersey, I don't know if anybody knows this, but in New Jersey, starting this year, January 2021, New Jersey actually has its own health insurance marketplace. It's called Get Covered New Jersey, or it's actually called Get Covered NJ. So if you Google Get Covered NJ, you could actually be under, as a, of course, New Jerseyan, a citizen of New Jersey, you could actually get insurance through New Jersey. So you don't even have to go at the federal level to the Affordable Care Act. So these are different things that, knowledge is power, that the church could actually continue to disseminate and give information. So I know a lot of particular things is basically money. Oh, we don't have the money for that. Well, let's
Right.
look at particular grants that we could actually apply, because a lot of churches are 501c3s, they're nonprofits, that you could be
Right.
eligible for these grants to fund different projects to help your community, right? So again, I think it's tapping into the resources that we already have in the pews, right? Because pastors themselves, they have a lot to deal with, right? And they can't do everything. They're not,
Right. Right.
MacGyver, right? They can't just do everything. They could just do. But if we have individuals, and we do within our congregations, within members in our churches that work in different areas in finance as well. We have tons of people that work in finance. In New York City, we're close to the city. Folks that work in Wall Street, folks that work for banks and financial services, right? Tap into them is like, maybe we could partner with a particular financial organization that could fund helping, I don't know, have vaccination sites or whatever. I mean, there's so much we could do, but it's just for us coming together and really utilizing the resources and coming up with a plan, a strategic plan, obviously, to get these things accomplished. Um, so that is a start. Coming together,
Yeah.
communicating, seeing what resources we have, and then of course go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes we don't think about reaching out to some of the other churches, or reaching out to see, like, we have a nurse, do you guys have someone else, like, and coming together
Right,
again, thinking out of our four walls of the church, but thinking as the bigger church, right? Think as the
right,
body of Christ, or just
right,
thinking as people of color, of faith, right? Breaking down the walls of between the religions and coming
right.
together, but having a sense of urgency to do it,
Mhm.
right? Or having that passion to say, this is something that needs to happen. And so my hope is that people are actually understanding and getting this sense of urgency, and knowing um, that this is something that needs to happen, that has to happen. So I thank you, listen, for just even giving that example of something simple that can be done that we don't always think about, like how to even get started. Sometimes we think a task is way more daunting than it really needs to be or has to be. And to me,
Right.
starting conversations about how can we come together as a community um, is one that has to happen.
Right. Absolutely.
Has
And
to, yeah,
no,
no,
and quickly, I was just saying, and really, a lot of times, through partnerships, right, strategic partnerships, you could get a lot done, right. I guess this is an African proverb. If you want to get somewhere quick, you go by yourself. You want to go somewhere far, you go together, right. Partnership is is key, right? And even partnering with folks that don't even look like you, right? Partnering with, of course, the synagogue down the street with our Jewish brothers and sisters, right, who have a similar history regarding oppression and struggle, right, to
yeah,
create a community center, right?
yeah,
You know, when's the last time we worship with each other? You know, one of the most famous quotes that MLK, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, the most segregated day is Sunday, right? Sunday at 10 or 11 a.m. I can't remember the actual time he said, right? And even segregated amongst ourselves. But when's the last time we actually worshiped with a African congregation? When's the
yeah,
last time we actually worshiped with a Jewish congregation? I tell you, one of the most amazing elements of worship for me is when I went into a progressive a Jewish synagogue. They were praying in Hebrew. And I tell you, I felt the spirit of God. No, and no lie, I felt the spirit of God in a way I never felt before.
wow,
Um, like it was just amazing. And though I know Jewish, a very little bit through seminary. I don't speak it fluently, right? You know, and I was singing, didn't know what I was singing, you know, but it was just a great
yeah,
embraceful time because of course the foundation of our religion is Judaism. Matter of fact, the whole Bible is Jewish. Jesus was Jewish. The
right,
disciples and apostles were Jewish. Paul was Jewish, you know. So it's like these are just examples of going out of our comfort zone and worshiping with other individuals and having that connection and camaraderie to create relationships, but also to learn a little bit more about God in a particular way that you never learned about God before.
right,
And enriches you, but also enriches others around you and enriches your relationship with God, but also the different people of God, right?
yeah,
So I'm just giving that as an example, but I would never experience that if I was like, you know what, let me just go and contact my rabbi friend. It's like, can I worship with you? And I'm telling you, it was an amazing experience. So I encourage that, you know, get out your comfort zone. It's not, I'm not saying to do it all the time, but you
right,
know, once a
right,
month or maybe
right.
every other month, go and worship in a different context that you're not used to worshiping in. Right.
Yeah, yeah, and it just reminds me of even when I was in India and watching them have church in India,
Hmm.
and for the first time I realized how much was lost for us as African Americans by the westernized Christianity, right?
Hmm.
Because they stripped away from us anything African, but
Hmm.
to be able to watch the Indian from India be fully like culturally Hindu almost, right? Pretty much
Right.
Hindu in culture, but Christian in faith.
Right.
It was like, who knew that could even happen? Who knew that you can have a culture but still have a different faith? Because we've been taught that we had to get rid of everything,
Right.
ascribe to their culture and the way that they see it. And so, to your point, so which is why most of us have been taught anything African is demonic. Anything African is like that's been the teaching. They stripped our language, stripped
Right.
everything from us, and gave us their stuff. Right. So it was something to watch and see people just praising God in their culture and
Right.
not having the constraints of it needing to look like how we do it.
Right.
I love what you said. And sometimes, we act like our faith is so fragile that if we go into another context that somehow we're going to lose Jesus. Like it's so,
Right.
it's so frail. And it really isn't. It can help us, if not anything, just appreciate. people who are faithful to what they believe. And then
Right.
maybe that's where we can come together, that we on the similarities versus always allowing the differences to come so big and between us.
Right. And when I went to the synagogue, it wasn't like I actually went closer to Jesus, because this is probably the closest way I experienced Jesus worshipped, right? As a Jewish man. It was
Yes.
absolutely I'm telling you, if you really like,
Wow.
I encourage everyone not to, of course, go and of course worship with our Muslim brothers and sisters, right? Those of a Abrahamic faith, right? But it was something about that Jewish worship when speaking in the original tongues of well, a little bit of Aramaic. They would talk, not the complete Aramaic that
Right,
Jesus Christ
right.
spoke, but it was just something about that the Spirit of God. It was absolutely amazing. I'll never forget. I want to go back, probably next year, because we still in the pandemic, so I ain't trying to, uh, you know what I'm saying.
I'm not going
But
back into church too much.
no, I'm
Honestly.
not trying to go back into my context. I'm just being very careful with going back to church myself. But yeah, I definitely like to do that again. It was such a powerful experience, and made me understand and learn more about God, because we like to put God in a box, right?
Right, right.
And God is not a box worthy God, right? God
Yeah,
is beyond our finite minds and our worship, right? God forbid, right? But yeah, so these are just conversations that we need to have, and communication is foundational regarding us as Black folk, and the different uniqueness of our blackness, or blacknesses, if I could say,
yeah.
in how we partner with each other. All this is based on just having a conversation, being like-minded, really casting aside the petty differences that we have, the petty
Right,
doctrines and theologies that we have.
right,
That stuff for the most part has been man-made, if not through the course of our history, right?
right,
But the biggest thing, of course, as Jesus told us, is to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And how do you love your neighbor as yourself? The first thing you do is, of course, be willing to talk and level-headed to each other, not to each
right.
other, but with each other, as I should say.
Right, right, right. Thank you. And that was really powerful to put in that context, because that is the command that he gave us, right?
Right.
And one of the major ways to do that is by dialoguing with others, especially those that we think we disagree with and that we don't feel we have anything in common. I mean, I have to challenge myself, to dialogue with people that I just don't, and to your point, honest dialogue, right? Where you're listening to learn, not listening to respond,
Right.
or as Peggy mentioned, not listening to convert anyone. My goal isn't to convert you, and your goal will not be to convert me, but for us to dialogue and understand each other better, so that we can come together for the common good
Right.
of humanity, right? The common good, not with the labels, but just because we are all children of God, right? Just because we are of the human race,
Right.
regardless of the race construct, right? So, um, Dr. Johnson, thank you so much. It's always good talking to you, but you come with so much knowledge that you drop such great nuggets on us. And again, please tell us your book, where people can get it so they can go out and get it. It's a resource that is a must have.
Yeah, it's called and I'll say this slowly. It's called the Anti-Racism Resource Guide.
Where can they find it?
You can find it anywhere. Usually, of course, you can find everything on Amazon, but those who are anti Jeff Bezos, Barnes and Noble, different other places as well, that you could find it, and it's about $20. So it's about 55 pages of Black owned, from getting cake to getting toilet paper to getting a pillow to getting
I love it.
opening your bank account. There's also credit unions that are Black owned that's on there. I mean, the list goes. There's investment firms, actually Ariel Investments. Even though I'm not getting paid to say this, Ariel Investments. The founder of Ariel Investments, a Black owned investment firm, one of the highly recognized in Wall Street. He is a predecessor of one of the folks at the Tulsa massacre in 1921, or the Black Wall Street. His predecessor owned a hotel that he said will be worth 100 million, at least $100 million today, if it wasn't, of course, destroyed at the 1921 Tulsa massacre. And he founded it. So his lineage, he's literally living up to his lineage. So there's tons of great resources there. And of course, if you can't find it, you just hit up Tisa. and she'll give you the full title, or she'll ask me and I could give you the information. But it's
That's
a good
right.
resource, and it has been called the Modern Day Green Book 2.0 by Black News Public Relations. So check it out, and actually I'll be doing book signings coming up in the fall as well. So stay tuned with that as well at your local neighborhood near you. So please support. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. We appreciate you. I hope you guys really enjoyed this dialogue. And again, get the book. It's a great resource guide. And also, we always talk about inventions, but we think of inventions of old days. We don't think about now things that people are actually doing and creating from the African diaspora that we can utilize and support. Thank you for being with me tonight. I hope you appreciate the dialogue. Again, tag someone, share it on your page. And I will see you all next week. Okay, same time, same place, same bad channel.